Okay, this is section 6.3. Someone requested that I make a video for those that missed class. So here it is. So sorry, I should start at page 1. Most calculators have an X to the Y key or a caret key for working with exponents. So to evaluate expressions of the form a to the x, you enter the base a, then press the exponent key or the caret key. Then you enter the exponent and press equal or enter. So, for example, if you're using a calculator and you want to evaluate 2 raised to the square root of 2 to 3 decimal places, you just plug it in, and I should use approximately. You get approximately 2.665. Okay, we talked about the laws of exponents before, but let's review them. So if you have the same base and different exponents and the terms are multiplied, you add the exponents. So that's a to the s plus t. If it's a to the s whole thing raised to the t, you multiply the exponents. So that's a to the st. Okay, if you have a, b multiplied together and then the whole thing raised to the 5th power, you have to essentially distribute the exponents. So that's a to the 5th, b to the 5th. Sorry, not 5th. That's an s. My bad. 1 to any power, of course, is 1. A to the negative s power is 1 over a to the s, or we can have 1 over a, the whole fraction raised to the s power. It's the same thing. And then anything raised to the 0 power is, of course, 1. So let's talk about exponential functions. Suppose we're given $10 and told every day you come to class the amount you're given doubles. So you get $10 to start with. The first day you come to class you get 20. The second day, the 20 from the first day doubles, so that's 40. Then that doubles to 80. Then that doubles 160, 320, 640, 1280, and 2560. As the value of the independent variable, so the days, increases by 1, what happens to the value of the dependent variable? Well, it doubles, right? So it increases by a factor of 2. As we said, it's doubling. So let's make a formula that models that situation. So we'll call the pay P and we will call the days X. So P of X, the pay, is 2 times the number of days. But does that quite work? Well, no, because if we put 0 in for X, we get 2 to the 0, which is 1. What do we need? We need a 10. So we better multiply by 10. So our formula is 10 times 2 to the x. Does that work out? Let's see. If we go for 3 days, 2 to the third is 8, and 8 times 10 is 80, so it does work. Okay, moving on to the next page. An exponential function is a function of the form c a to the x equals f of x, where a is a positive real number not equal to 1, and c is any real number except for 0. So the domain of all exponential functions is negative infinity to infinity. Remember, the domain is all the possible x values. The base a is what we call the growth factor. And because f of 0 equals c times a to the 0, which is c times 1, we call c the initial value. Okay, so why does a have to be greater than 0? And why can it not equal 1? Well, what happens if a is a negative 2 and the exponent is 1/2? So that would be a to the x would be negative 2 to the 1/2 power. But remember, 1/2 power is the square root. So what happens if we have the square root of negative 2? It's not a real number. And so we run into problems. Okay, what happens if a is 1? Well, what happens? If a is 1, f of 0 is 1. F of 1 is 1 to the 1, which is 1. F of 2 is 1 squared, which is 1. F of 3 is 1 cubed, which is still 1. So what we have is a horizontal line at y equals 1. So that's why we can't have a be 1. Okay, so on the first page we found the model. We called it p of x. They're calling it f of x. That's fine. Equals 10 times 2 to the x. So find the following ratios. Well, if we go back to our chart, f of 1 is 20 and f of 0 is 10. So the ratio is 2. F of 2 was 40 and f of 1 was 20, which is still 2. Then we had 80 and 40, which is still 2. So for an exponential function, the ratio of consecutive outputs is a, or what we called the growth factor. For 1 unit increases in the input. So that leads us to a theorem that says for an exponential function, f of x equals c times a to the x, with a greater than 0, a not equal to 1, and c not equal to 0. If x is any real number, then f of x plus 1 divided by f of x is a, or f of x plus 1 is a times f of x. And that can be useful for us to know.